Welcome to today's episode of Forest FM. I'm Matt McCombs, State Forester and Director of the Colorado State Forest Service. I'm glad you're joining us for a conversation that hits close to home, literally. We live and work in a beautiful place, but it's no secret that wildfires are a real and growing risk here in Colorado. And when we talk about preparing for wildfire, it's not just something we say to the public. It's something we believe in, and it's something we experience just like you do. We're not just people working for the state. We're your neighbors, your friends, and the folks you see at the grocery store. We have homes and families here, and like everyone else, we face the same risks you face as it relates to wildfire. Today we're sharing a story that's both personal and powerful about one of our own, Deputy State Forester Christina Burri. Christina has dedicated her career to protecting our watersheds and forests, but recently she found herself on the other side of things when a wildfire came dangerously close to her home. Thanks to the steps she took to prepare, like home hardening and creating defensible space, firefighters were able to step in and keep the flames at bay. However, other folks in Christina's neighborhood were not so lucky, and our hearts go out to those that have lost their home to wildfire. And we feel deeply fortunate that Christina's home made it through. We often talk about defensible space and wildfire preparation, but Christina's story has really brought it home, because it shows that these measures can work. Mitigation works, and they can make all the difference when wildfire comes to your neighborhood. It's a reminder that whatever side of the table we're on, we're all in this together. What we do at home affects our community. We all want to protect our homes, our families, and our futures right here in Colorado.
Welcome back and thanks for joining us today. My name is Phil Peterson. I'm a forestry communications specialist. Just a heads up that this episode does feature some sensitive moments about those impacted by wildfire. Just a few weeks ago, Christina Burri nearly lost her home to a wildfire. The Alexander Mountain Fire started on July 29th, north of U.S. Highway 34 and west of Loveland, and it swelled to a total of 9,668 acres and was officially declared contained on August 17th. With wildfire being a year-round issue in Colorado, wildfire preparation is an important point of discussion, and our guest today will share how her proactive steps enabled firefighters to save her home from wildfire.
My name's Christina Burri. I'm the Deputy State Forester at the Colorado State Forest Service. And I've been with the agency about 5 months now in this new role. Prior to, I worked for Denver Water, managing their watershed planning program. Prior to Denver Water, I worked for the Bureau of Reclamation. So I moved to Colorado about 10 years ago from Ohio and just fell in love with Colorado and wanted to move out for the nature and hiking and all the outdoor recreation opportunities. And so when I was working at the Bureau, I single female and was looking for homes, and that was tough. It was really hard to find an affordable place to live. I remember going to look at homes in Loveland, and that day someone would offer cash for the house, and it was just really hard to find a home. And so I remember looking at Storm Mountain, and there was this beautiful log home, 2 acres, and I just fell in love with it and knew the risk. I knew that there would be fire. I could see the burn scar from the Bobcat Gulch fire, and I thought about the risk and took that risk on. It was just me. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a family. And the drive was short to work, so there wasn't even a stoplight on the way to work. And so it seemed like a good decision for me, understanding the risk that was there and the trade-offs that come with that risk. But I do love it up there. I love that I see turkeys. I see deer. I love the hummingbirds. I love that I can just go mountain biking and hiking from my house. I love the community and neighbors. But there are challenges with it. It is a one-way in, one-way out community, and the road is tough. And so there are challenges that come with living up there, and certainly fire. So I've been up there for about 10 years and was evacuated for Cameron Peak in 2020 and was evacuated for about a month. That was tough. When I was evacuated for Cameron Peak, I knew I was going to be evacuated for a fire at some point. Like I knew that fire was going to occur while I was living there. I didn't think that another evacuation would happen 4 years later with the Alexander Mountain Fire. So yeah, you can see so the fire burned this way, towards my house from down there. I was at work. I even remember going out that morning. I like to go out on my deck. I hang my hummingbird feeder, and I look around, and I didn't see any smoke, anything concerning that morning, and went to work. And yeah, I got the message about a mandatory evacuation in my community, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have anything.
How did you get that notice?
Again, during Cameron Peak, I signed up for the NOCO alerts through Larimer County. So I receive alerts for fires as well as floods or any type of hazard in the county. So I tried to go back, and I heard that they were letting people through with animals, which I don't have, thankfully. And I saw the plume of smoke as I was driving towards the canyon, and just thought, oh my gosh, that is really close to where I live. It was awful to see.
So you headed back, and you were able to get to your home?
No. I saw the plume of smoke, and I saw the line of traffic on 34, and I also saw there were emails throughout the community that said, yeah, they were only letting people back in with animals, and thought, well, I don't have an animal, so I'm going to go back to work, and maybe I'll try to get back in next day or two. So I thought that it was something that they'd be able to get under control, but yeah, I tried again a day later, and the wind was just blowing from the east, which is really odd. It usually doesn't blow from the east, it blows from the west. And there were emails throughout the community that were saying, hey, if you haven't gone back to your home, now is the time to do it because of the predicted winds and weather pattern and the low relative humidities too. I have a weather station up there, and yeah, I noticed the relative humidities were really low, and that was concerning, and the direction of the wind was concerning. It was blowing the fire towards our community. So I tried, and I went to the Loveland side of the canyon, and again could see the huge plume of smoke, and the officer at the mouth of the canyon was advising not to go in, that the fire was at the mouth of the canyon, at the cherry store, and for those who have driven through the canyon, who know that landmark, and he said, you may have better luck going through the other side of the canyon near Estes. So I drove all the way around. On the way, saw the fire in Lyons, and saw flames on that mountainside driving through Lyons, knowing that area was going to get closed soon. Made it to Estes, made it to the other side of the canyon, and the officer there just, again, highly advised not going back to my home, that the fire was at the community, was at Storm Mountain. And it was an awful feeling knowing that it wasn't worth risking my life, and also getting in the way of the firefighters' efforts. So I turned around. At that time, the fire was moving in the direction towards Glen Haven, and I evacuated my mom voluntarily. And so we left.
So no chance to go back to your home at all.
No.
And you certainly made the right call as far as you said, not risking it and not getting in the way of the active efforts that would be, trying to protect your home. I don't know, did you have any sense of the capacity and, the suppression efforts? The
initial communication about the suppression, I do feel like it was well done. I think the county did a really good job showing the burn scar on the map and where the fire was. But the fire had continued to grow and continue to push into the community. Then it went on to the national forest, the Arapahoe National Forest. And so the U.S. Forest Service suppression team stepped in, and communication was good. They did briefings at least once a day, if not a couple times a day. And I always awaited those briefings. They always provided really good information and just relief as to what was going on with the suppression. And the fire continued to grow, and so they brought in an incident management team, Southwest Incident Management Team, that was highly experienced in these complex, large fires. At that point in time, I knew when that team moved in that the fire had already burned around my home. And the sheriff's office, too, took part in the briefings, and the communication was great. But I think the hardest part was just as individual homeowners, you know they're working hard, but you just don't know the state of your home. You don't know if it burned to the ground. You don't know if it was impacted. And so it is just waiting and just being supportive and knowing that they're working as hard as they can and trying to keep everybody updated as much as they can about the suppression efforts in the fire.
Right.
Yeah, I thought when I came back home, I thought for sure I knew it would look different, and I in my mind I imagined all the trees gone, and
just black and torched.
Just black and torched, and that was the image I was preparing myself to come home to. I was awaiting to hear if my home made it or not. Ponderosas. Yeah, Wednesday and Thursday were really tough, emotionally. I truly had no idea whether my house burned or not. And then it was really hard waiting. I waited, I think, about a week since the fire started and I was evacuated to hear anything about my home. I was so nervous, but at the same time, just one of the benefits too of doing the forest management and the defensible space around my home was that at least gave me some tangible hope that I did what I could, and that did help provide some relief when I got super nervous and anxious waiting to hear any news. It was also really tough. There were news and media articles about some of my neighbors that found out they lost their homes while I was waiting to hear about mine. One was really close to where mine was, and it broke my heart seeing that they lost their home. This is my neighbor. You can see his house is gone, burned down on the ground.
Holy shit.
I mean, so close. It is insane.
It's 100 feet, maybe?
Yeah, it's really, really sad to see that.
That's intense.
Yeah.
After this week, what was the all clear for you, and when did you get a chance to go back?
So I got the call from the county. I was in Denver and was at a restaurant, and yeah, it was amazing to hear the news. They said my house was undamaged by the fire, and I just cried and was just so thankful, and I immediately told the server. I just was crying. I was so happy, and he said, "That's great." And he was like, "I grew up in California, and so I struggled with that too, and that reality, and so it was just a really celebratory moment. I was just so relieved, and so thankful. And so going back, I didn't know what it would look like. In my mind, I thought that worst case scenario would be like everything just black, and I was so happy to see when I got back that my house was okay. Most of the trees looked good. They survived. There was some fire damage at the base of some of the trees, but the ponderosa pines performed like they were supposed to because they were limbed up, and the fire looked like low severity, and it crept along the ground. It looked like a beneficial prescribed fire. That's how it appeared. And so I was really thankful and relieved. And I couldn't believe it. Even just 3 days after being back, I saw the turkeys and the hummingbirds, and the wildlife was still there, and the wildlife was okay. But the area has changed. I mean, some of my immediate neighbors lost their homes, and walking around and seeing that is really hard. My heart sank when I knew they knew that their house burnt down and how close it was to mine.
I mean, this is a quarter mile at most.
Yeah. So I feel very fortunate and lucky, and thankful, but also it does look different. The fire burned really, really patchy in that area, in that community. One of my neighbors that is next to my property, she has about 5 acres, and she did forest management on her property as well, and her house was okay. So this is Carol's home, and you can see she does a lot of work on her property, and it's a lot of fuels mitigation, so her house is fine. This house was not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So sad. Yeah, there's these 3 right here. Yeah. And then the one right below it, I think they're doing work to rebuild. But yeah, all this whole area. It's awful.
So how did you start thinking about wildfire preparation for your home and property?
Yeah, it started with the previous owner, actually. The previous owner did a lot of good work. So when I was looking at houses, I did notice some of the homes did not have treated properties, or they were really heavily forested. And I was like, gosh, that's going to be really tough to get insurance. So with this one, that was one thing that really stood out about this house and this property was it was already really well maintained and treated. So there were beautiful ponderosa pines, had openings. It wasn't overly crowded or dense. So it was a healthy forest. And so I just really had to maintain what the previous owners did. Continuing to look at the areas immediately around the house and removing trees that are growing, and then looking further out onto the property where there's dead trees, taking those down, working with my friends, neighbors to cut down trees and also limb up trees that had lower branches that could carry the fire into the canopy, but also looking at some enjoyable options for landscaping. So a few years ago, saved up money to do a big landscaping project at my house that would be not only enjoyable, but help provide that defensible space or secure that defensible space immediately around the home. So I worked with a neighbor that owns a local landscaping company and put in some gravel pathways around the home to provide that defensible space in that home ignition zone and keeping vegetation out of that area, as well as it just provides a nice path to walk, as well as a flagstone patio surrounded by gravel, and then a larger retaining wall with bigger stones. And that landscaping, I think, was not only just a good investment for enjoying sitting outside and having company and family and friends over, but it also helps provide defensible space immediately around the home.
Yeah, and I think the big thing there, and it's so awesome that you did that work, is that it's enjoyable, it's purposeful, and it provides that defensible space. So you don't have to compromise with, making improvements to your property that are aimed around wildfire protection without, being able to feel like you're enjoying your home and making the most of your home. And I also think that people have maybe some reservations about removing that vegetation or getting away from that nature feeling. But, I was at your home. It's natural and organic. It doesn't have this feeling of harsh separation, except for the fact that there is actual, space that does separate it in some areas. And so it's effective, but it doesn't feel like sterile or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think the wildlife like it too. Like I said, I love seeing the turkeys and deer and those openings in the canopy. I think the birds like that, and they also have more space to just kind of move through the trees in the forest. So I think it's been, really purposeful for defensible space and thinking about success with fire suppression efforts. But it's just a healthier forest, and also the wildlife really love it.
Yeah. Was there ever a point where you had decided, I'm prepared, this is enough, I'm ready in case a wildfire occurred? Or were these just kind of gradual improvements that you did as you noticed things?
They were gradual. With Cameron Peak, when that happened in 2020, that fire went on for so long, and it started actually pretty far away from where I live, but it burned for so long that I had time to be a little bit more aggressive and work again, like thanks to my friends and family, knowing that the fire season was bad in 2020. And so we did more limbing of trees then, and mowed some areas, and we're just overall more aggressive, motivated by that fire and how bad the fire season was and the conditions were. And then since Cameron Peak, it's really, I think it's been on everybody's mind in Colorado about how we can be more prepared and mindful about preparing for evacuation, but also just what we can do around our communities and homes. So I have done progressively more work leading up to Cameron Peak, and certainly motivated by Cameron Peak to do more. Looking back now, I think that I could have still been more aggressive. So my home was okay, but my propane tank burned and the gas line. And so there were trees that were next to my propane tank. And I immediately thought, like, gosh, if I just would have taken those down, my propane tank maybe would have been okay.
Right. Well, I mean, there isn't much better motivation than that, to be seeing it on the horizon, having it go on for multiple months. That's definitely the time where it's top of mind. So it's great that you were able to take that action then, but now it seems like more of a matter of upkeep. And it's interesting that, the propane tank, there's a tree near that. It's a pretty, I would say, scenic tree, right? So if you were to remove that, you'd be opening up a lot of that space that's kind of like providing privacy to your home, but it's also kind of part of what makes it feel like it's still in the trees. So I can see how that's a good example of what is absolutely necessary versus what is maybe extending a little bit beyond that.
Definitely. Yeah, there's trade-offs. Yeah, there's 3 ponderosa pines that I just love. Like they're old and big and beautiful, and I definitely have an attachment to them. And so there are trade-offs with privacy and just people's affection for the trees on their property. But the ones that were close to the propane tank, I'm understanding now the trade-offs, like, that maybe would have resulted differently in saving at least that propane tank.
Right. And I wonder too, would the cost of moving the propane tank be less than the cost of replacing the whole setup now? Instead of cutting down the tree, could you have just moved the tank earlier?
That's a really good point. Since the tank did burn, I did relocate it closer to the road where it's easier to access and more clear for more, again, like thinking about defensible space for your home, but also for the utilities and like some of the features of your home that you rely on.
The work that you had done, or the condition of your home, you had removed some of the density of the trees surrounding your home. You had trimmed low-hanging branches to reduce the likelihood that a ground fire turns into a canopy fire and increases in intensity near your home. You had installed gravel pathways and a flagstone patio that created both fuel breaks and defensible space for firefighters, and we'll talk more about that later. You had done mowing and upkeep for all that vegetative growth, removed new growing trees that were kind of encroaching in the property. And then the other one, you had stone siding on your home that extended up to 4 or 5 feet in some places, right? Even that helps remove the chance that vegetation or grasses growing near the edge of that home can ignite more combustible components like the wood of your home, right? Is there anything else?
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And it's a combination of building materials and static conditions like installing a patio, right? It's not going anywhere, as well as the upkeep and the vegetative management. Do you want to touch on how that patio space and the defensible space helped those firefighters position themselves?
The patio space definitely, I think, helped provide them not only access to suppress the fire, but a place to hold the fire. So because it was all stone and big stone, you could see where the fire burned right up to that stone, that they were able to hold the fire right there. It was effective in being able to access and hold the fire at that location where there wasn't vegetation.
And also, the location of your home being kind of at the bend in the road and potentially being a good spot for access for them to hold the fire from that direction regardless too. So it's very hard to, as you were describing, know what was actively happening in that effort as well as the fire behavior. But beyond all of that, you provided a tool for them, both for your home and for just the general fire line and their efforts.
Yeah. The fire burned. Later, there's a burned area emergency response map that shows the severity of the fire, and it burned at low severity around my home and on my property. Because it burned at low severity and the road, the location of the road, that's where they were able to hold the fire, and that was the extent. They were able to suppress it at the road, and it didn't continue further on into the community.
Right. Any thoughts on how this has changed your perspective on what home means for you, living in the wildland-urban interface? And has this changed your relationship with nature, with wildfire, and with home?
Yeah, it has changed my perspective. When Cameron Peak happened, I knew that there would be fires. I didn't expect that I would be evacuated 4 years after Cameron Peak. I'm more worried about the fire season and when I'm going to get evacuated again and go through this again. It was so hard emotionally, not only just to be prepared, but also mentally prepared for the emotional toll that it takes.
Is there any feeling, which I think would be justified, by the way, of I need to move, I need to get out? Some people don't have that luxury. Do you feel like you have the ability to just get up and go? I mean, this is a place you've lived for 10 years. Is this enough for you to want to just leave completely?
Possibly. It's definitely put the thought in my mind, but there may be like the want to leave versus the ability to. And with housing prices, that's tough. Like that is a tough decision for me to make. There are things that I love about living up there. I very much enjoy it, given the challenges. So it's a hard thing for me to come to terms with or decide, because there's so much I still love about being up there, and I do personally. I still want to be in that house and in that community. I think I will be there for a while. How I used to think about it was like, that is where I'm going to grow old. I don't know truly if that's really practical. I think I will likely sell it sooner than I had ever planned.
Yeah, I think you described the trade-offs really well. I mean, the incredible scenery and the kind of remote feeling that's up there, that's where it's at. And so that's the trade-off of living in the wildland urban interface. And yeah, I think it is challenging to think far in the future and understand, is this in the long term something that I can, be able to keep up with this work and be able to feel like I can evacuate if I need to? Do you have a family? Do you have things that start to outweigh the pros and the cons? I can imagine that those are all just thoughts swarming around in this recent weeks. Are there any specific things that you want to do to change your wildfire strategy, preparedness strategy, or things that you would recommend that other people do?
Yeah. I definitely want to be more aggressive in taking down more Douglas firs, things that could move the fire into the canopy, continuing to be aggressive about limbing the trees. I think just overall, just being more aggressive about fuels treatments, not just around the home, the immediate home, but like around the whole property.
One of the things that we outlined in the Live Wildfire Ready campaign is that home mitigation actions are low cost and easy to do. As far as someone who's looking to get started with maybe being more aware, taking more actions, or being more aggressive, as you say, what are your tips as far as just getting started?
Definitely thinking about the different zones around your home. So targeting that first 100 feet around your house, keeping that either mowed, making sure there's no trees in that area. But I would definitely prioritize the area in that home ignition zone. And then moving out from there. So thinking about expanding that. I've really enjoyed having friends and family over, and they bring their chainsaws or saw, and they have helped. And I'll make a weekend out of it. I'll have a cookout, and that's just some of what we do together is manage the forest.
That's honestly a great idea. I think a lot of people should do that. Similar to how the patio is enjoyable and multi-purpose, so can the mitigation action be. What is your outlook now on Colorado's year-round wildfire season with the importance of taking action to protect your property?
Fire is inevitable. We are going to experience fire in Colorado, and that's why I'm grateful to be working for the State Forest Service in this role and feel like I'm trying to change that trajectory where we know fire is going to occur, and we have to work together and manage our forests, get them to a state that can receive fire in a way that won't damage all the values at risk that we care about, like our homes, like our water supplies. A good number of us live in areas where fire is going to occur. I'm so grateful. Yeah, just feel that sense of meaning in my work. And this experience in my personal life has just emphasized how important it is to manage our forests.
So despite all this, you're optimistic?
Yes, I am optimistic. I think that it's going to be challenging. I mean, we have challenging landscapes. I think given those challenges, though, it's something that we're all working towards. We all love Colorado. We're out here for all the wonderful things that the state brings us in terms of our nature and outdoor opportunities. And we love the forest here. And so I am optimistic that we can work to get them to a better state to prepare for the fires that we're going to see in the future.
Right. So just to wrap us up here with some final steps, just to keep in mind, you can check out your local community wildfire protection plans through our website. There'll be a link for that in the description. But you can see if you have one in your area, and that's a good way to not only get involved and kind of be an active community member, but to understand, the layout of your area, what resources are available, and what groups are active in not only the land management, but also the response and suppression side. In addition, check those alert services. You mentioned NOCO Alert for this area, but there's also a bunch of other ones that may be relevant and different for your area. And then lastly, the big one is learning how to prepare your home and property and keep up with it over the entire year. And you can visit the Live Wildfire Ready website, livewildfireready.org, to check out those actions and start exploring that. We also have an article that outlines Christina's story, and there'll be a link for that in the description. Christina, I want to thank you for your time and thanks for your vulnerability and honesty with sharing the story. I know it's not easy, but I think this is a really important thing to be able to share with people. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be able to share my story, and I hope that it helps people and how we plan and be proactive for wildfire.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Forest FM. To learn more about the podcast and the Colorado State Forest Service, please visit our website at csfs.colostate.edu. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.